They called her a vessel of light in the parish whispers, the kind of woman who knelt so long in prayer that the floorboards bore faint hollows beneath her knees. She would rise from devotion only to fold napkins with the same reverence, to pour tea as though offering sacrament. Holiness, though, is glass kissed by frost, beautiful until pressure finds the flaw. And love, when it comes forbidden, arrives not as thunder, but as the slow, patient crack that follows. In the merciless summer of 1859, along the low, black water reaches of the Mississippi Delta, where heat rose in visible waves and the river itself seemed to breathe, the mistress of Cypress Hollow, Leora Caldwell, gave her heart to the one man her husband most delighted in humbling. When their lips finally touched beneath the great cypress draped in Spanish moss, the air thickened. Not with storm, but with the quiet recoil of something divine looking elsewhere. The season descended like illness that would not lift. The sun struck brass, mosquitoes sang constant complaint, every breath tasted of river mud and blooming jasmine laced with decay. Cypress Hollow stood on its low ridge above flooded fields, whitewashed clapboard gleaming like bone through fever haze, galleries shaded deep, the silence inside heavier than any preacher's warning. Leora passed through its corridors like moonlight on still water, present yet untouchable. She had once been the ornament of Natchez society, harpist whose fingers drew Schubert from strings like confession, reader of Shelley and the Brontes, her laughter soft and unexpected as spring rain. 7 years bound to Gideon, Caldwell had planed her down to pale plains and quiet habits. Mirrors now showed only a woman whose eyes held winter, even in July. She prayed without ceasing, morning, noon, vespers, midnight, yet the words felt borrowed, brittle, returning to her empty. Gideon trusted only in yield per acre, the weight of iron, and the certainty that fear kept order better than scripture. His voice lingered in the rafters even when he rode out at first light. Dawn after dawn, the hands moved from the quarters to the rows, shoulders rounded, eyes on the dirt that stained their feet red. Leora watched always from the east gallery, fingers pressed to the scrolled iron railing until the metal warmed beneath her palms. Among so many bowed heads, one figure refused anonymity. Malachi Reed, tall as the young cypresses, shoulders carved by labor, a thin raised scar running from beneath his left eye to the corner of his mouth, like a tear frozen in flesh. The driver marked him reliable. Gideon marked him unbreakable. To Leora he was evidence that the Creator still signed beauty beneath man-made chains. Sin, like most quiet revolutions, began in pity. One blistering midday, she saw him stagger between the cane, shirt torn open, back painted fresh scarlet. Gideon, already swaying before noon on corn whiskey, had taken the lash to him for a row judged crooked. No servant answered her summons for water and clean cloth, so she carried them herself down the shell path, past the smokehouse, through air that shimmered like oil on water. When she reached him, Malachi tried to sink to his knees in reflex. She caught his forearm, firm, careful. "No, you'll tear the skin worse." He raised his head slowly. Surprise flickered not at the act, but at the sound of her voice, unstarched, unsteady, almost kind. Their eyes held for one suspended breath. Something wordless crossed the space between them, not lust, not yet, only the shock of being seen as human. Her heart beat so loud the cicadas seemed to fall silent around it. That night she scoured his blood from beneath her nails in the porcelain basin and found the Lord's Prayer would not form. Downstairs, Gideon roared through a drunken spiritual, each slurred line a small blasphemy. Leora stared at the pink threads curling in the water. They looked like the first truthful signature her life had ever worn. Weeks bled into one another in the plantation's brutal metronome. Whip-crack greeting sunrise, field hollers rising like smoke at dusk, the dry rasp of cane leaves in any breeze. Leora floated through the rhythm untouched, spectral, until she glimpsed Malachi near the gin house, near the well, near the cedar fence, and each time, breath caught as though she had swallowed her own heartbeat. She began to leave small offerings where only he would find them. A square of gingerbread wrapped in waxed paper, a tin cup of buttermilk left sweating beside the spring, a strip of linen bandage folded beneath a stone by the tool shed. He never spoke of them, never lifted his eyes toward the great house. Once, on the pine straw path behind the laundry, their steps crossed by accident. He paused, lowered his head, murmured, "Grateful, ma'am." 4 syllables, fragile as moth wings. That night, she dreamed of walking into black water until it closed over her head, her white chemise blooming scarlet from the hem upward like ink spreading through silk. She woke with wet cheeks and the first gray light accusing her through lace curtains. Gideon grew sharper with every rainless day. He cursed the river for rising without mercy, yet withholding rain from the fields, cursed hands too slow, cursed a God who seemed deaf to white men's petitions. At supper he spun yarns of patrollers, of necks stretched from oak limbs, of lessons written in blood. Leora sat silent, fork idle. He drained his tumbler and sneered. "All them prayers and the sky stays brass. Maybe the Almighty prefers a different color skin." Alone afterward in the dim parlor, she pressed fingertips to her throat and whispered into the moth-haunted dark, "If this longing is transgression, then let transgression school me in compassion." Next morning she carried ointment and fresh bandages to the curing barn. Malachi was there splitting kindling, shirt plastered to muscle with sweat. He stilled when her shadow crossed the threshold. "You shouldn't come here," he said, voice pitched for her ears alone. "Gideon's gone to Vicksburg on business." The silence that followed had its own heartbeat. She offered the jar. Their fingers met, brief, electric. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. That night, the drought broke. Rain fell in silver sheets. Lightning carved the sky open like scripture being rewritten. Leora stood at the long window watching blue-white veins stitch the dark, thinking of scar tissue beneath calloused skin, of mercy wearing a dangerous face. For a fragile span of weeks, the elements themselves seemed to conspire in their favor. Evening fog rose off the river like veils. Thunderheads parted just enough to let moonlight through. Nights cooled enough for breath to slow and linger. Each evening she left a single oil lamp burning low in the attic window. A wordless summons. He came ghost-footed through darkness, never claiming, only arriving. They spoke in half-sentences, in pauses. Sometimes he sounded out verses from her worn Bible while she held the page steady. When his deep voice shaped mercy, her ribcage ached. When he hesitated over redemption, her throat closed. No Eden lasts long where cotton grows. Gossip is hardier than any crop. The laundress, Hannah, noticed the lamp's steady glow, the faint scent of river pine and lye soap clinging to the mistress's wrapper, the single muddy boot print on the back stair that no one claimed. Terror loosened her tongue in stages, first to the other women, then, inevitably, to the driver. Gideon returned in early November, reeking of sour mash and lost wagers. He pressed dry lips to Leora's forehead without looking at her face. "You prayed for rain," he muttered, "never for money." She answered nothing. Silence had become her armor. That night he prowled the halls, boots ringing like pistol shots on heart pine. In the music room he stopped at the rosewood pianoforte, dust thick on the keys. He struck one sour chord, then noticed the faint amber light leaking from the attic casement. "Who keeps that candle burning?" he asked the empty air. "I do," Leora answered from the stairwell. "For what?" "So the house remembers it still contains a living soul." His laugh was a blade without handle. Morning brought the driver, hat in hand, voice greased with concern. "Talk going round, sir, about your lady, about the tall one, Malachi." Gideon went marble still, and rose, slow as floodwater rising. "Fetch him!" Leora heard the shouting from the upper gallery. Curses, boots skidding in wet clay, the clank of trace chains. She ran barefoot down the stairs, skirts dragging through puddles. In the yard, Malachi knelt in mud, wrists bound. Gideon stood over him, lash already uncoiled. "Speak," Gideon snarled. "What charm did you work to make my wife forget her station?" Malachi raised calm eyes and held his tongue. The first lash landed, then the second. Leora flew forward. "Stop!" Gideon spun. "Inside!" "You'll kill him!" He barked laughter. "Maybe then you'll have cause to pray with real feeling." The lash rose again. Leora threw herself between them. Leather kissed her upper arm. Pain exploded white. Blood soaked through lawn in seconds. Gideon froze, arm arrested mid-swing. She looked up at him, voice nearly gentle. "Any wrong done here began long before tonight." The whip fell from his hand into mud. He turned and strode away, leaving only the copper taste of rain returning. That night, Leora slipped to the mule barn, where Malachi lay tied but breathing. She cut the ropes with garden shears, pressed her forehead to his once. "Go, while there's still dark. You'll pay in blood," he whispered. "Then let the price be honest." He touched her wrist, reverent, brief, then vanished into river mist. Dawn found Gideon absent, only the lash left coiled across the piano like an unanswered question. But grace is a short tenant. By week's end, riders returned with dogs and hard faces. Leora trailed their torchlight through dripping cane, nightdress torn by thorns, feet raw. In a clearing beside the sluggish bayou, she found them. Malachi kneeling in black mud, Gideon sighting along a pistol barrel. "Run," Gideon said, almost tender. "Give me the satisfaction." Leora stepped forward. "No more of this." Gideon swung the muzzle toward her. "Step aside." "Please." The shot split the night like glass under a hammer. Malachi folded forward. Leora dropped beside him, hands pressing uselessly against the spreading dark. His gaze met hers, quiet, finished. One fingertip brushed her cheek. Then nothing. She rose, gown heavy with his blood, and faced her husband. He retreated a step. "See what your rebellion has wrought." Lightning ripped the sky. Thunder answered like verdict. A massive cypress limb, smoldering from a strike, tore free and struck Gideon across the back. He fell without cry into the mud. Rain hissed on coals. Leora knelt again beside Malachi. No pulse, only water drumming on leaves. At first light, the few hands left found her still there, murmuring something too low to catch. They carried both bodies beneath the great cypress and turned earth in silence. No scripture was spoken, no bell tolled. Months passed, but time at Cypress Hollow no longer advanced. It revolved, carrying the scent of wet cypress and charred moss. The house sagged beneath invisible weight. Servants swore doors sighed open at midnight. The pianoforte struck single notes like heartbeats. Shadows moved against logic. Leora rarely left her room. She sat watching the tree, half living, half lightning scarred, while its moss drifted in the wind like gray hair. Blossoms still fell each spring, pale green turning white, relentless as unanswered grace. One moonless night, she walked barefoot to the graves, laid both palms on the raw earth, began to hum the old river hymn Malachi used to sing beneath his breath while he split kindling. Her voice rose, fragile then firm. Wind carried it across the water. Somewhere in the dark, another register seemed to join, deep, resonant, twining with hers. Morning found her gone. Room empty, bed unmade, Bible open to the flyleaf, 7 words in her fine copperplate. Mercy is what love pays in full. No body was recovered. Some said the bayou claimed her. Others swore she melted into the cypress roots, her spirit threading new needles each April in pale catkins. On thick, humid nights, travelers still report a woman in white moving through the old fields, gown trailing mist, face lifted toward indifferent stars. Call her name, and a tall shadow appears at her shoulder, hand resting light as blessing. Both dissolve, leaving only the perfume of river water and night-blooming jasmine. And when thunder walks the levee, a single piano note drifts across abandoned land, delicate, grieving, unresolved. No one answers it. They stand in warm rain and let the sound remind them. Even the deepest trespass can still reach, trembling, toward forgiveness. The South never truly buries its unfinished stories. It braids them into river silt, into work songs, into the slow drip of moss from ancient branches. Listen long enough, beneath the drone of frogs, the roll of distant thunder, and you may still hear them, 2 voices rising together, no longer begging pardon, only naming mercy at last, learning its true, costly name.